Hey everyone, and welcome. So, you're prepping for a Node.js interview. You know, and I know. There's one framework that's basically guaranteed to pop up: Express.js. It is the backbone of so many web apps. And in this explainer, we are going to crack the code on the single most important concept you need to know to absolutely nail those questions. Let's get right into it.
But first, I want to ask you something. What do you think is the one big idea in Express that once you really get it, makes everything else just fall into place? Keep that question in the back of your mind. I promise, by the time we're done here, you are going to have the answer.
Okay, so first things first, before we can get to that big secret, we have to make sure we're on the same page about what Express even is and, where it fits in the whole Node.js world.
Now, this is absolutely crucial. Express isn't a replacement for Node. It's a layer that sits right on top. Think of Node's built-in HTTP module as this raw, powerful engine. It's amazing, but you have to assemble a lot of the parts yourself. Express? Well, that's the sleek chassis and the user-friendly dashboard that makes building a high-performance web server so much simpler. And that right there is exactly why it's so popular. It handles all the nitty-gritty, complex parts of routing and managing requests and responses. This frees you, the developer, up to focus on what actually matters, building the cool, unique features of your app. It's all about making our lives easier.
All right, the moment you've been waiting for. It's time to answer that big question from the beginning. The one concept that unlocks everything in Express is coming up right now. That's it. That's the word: middleware. If you can truly understand what this one word means, you basically understand the entire philosophy of Express.js. It is the central nervous system that everything else, from your routes to your authentication, even your error handling, is built on.
So what the heck is it? Well, at its core, middleware is just a function, but it's a special function with a superpower. It gets to intercept every single request that comes into your server. It gets its hands on the request object, the response object, and this really important third thing, a function called next. And trust me, that next function is the secret sauce to the whole thing.
This here is the perfect way to picture it. Think of your app as an assembly line for requests. A request comes in, and bam, it hits the first middleware. Maybe something that just logs the request. Once that's done, it calls next, and whoosh, control gets passed to the next station, say an authentication check. If that passes, it calls next again, moving it down the line until it finally hits the route handler that sends back a response. So a super common interview question is about the difference between app.use and something like app.get. The key takeaway is this: app.use doesn't care about the HTTP method. It's method agnostic. It'll run for a get, a post, a delete, anything as long as the path matches. App.get, on the other hand, is a specific route handler. It's pretty much the final stop on that assembly line, but only for GET requests.
Okay, theory time is over. We get the idea of a middleware pipeline. Now let's see how this actually helps us with the practical, everyday task of grabbing data from an incoming request. In pretty much any Express app, data is going to come at you in three main ways. You've got route parameters like /ID, which are perfect for identifying one specific thing. Then you have query parameters, which are great for options like filtering or sorting. And finally, you have the request body. This is usually for post or put requests, and it contains the actual data payload, like all the details for a new user you're creating. Express makes getting all three of these super simple right off the rec object. And boom, here's where it all comes back together. How do you get that request body? You guessed it, you need middleware to parse it first. Back in the day, you had to install a whole separate library for this, but now it's built right in. You just add one line, app.use express.json, and that's it. You've just set up a middleware that will automatically parse any incoming JSON and stick it onto rec.body for you. See? It's all middleware. All right, let's level up. We're moving on from simple, single-file apps to how you'd actually structure a real production-ready application. This is the kind of stuff that interviewers use to tell the beginners from the pros. So, as your app gets bigger, the last thing you want is one giant server file with hundreds of different routes. That's a total nightmare to maintain. The solution? Express.router. It lets you create these neat little modular mini applications. You can have one file for all your user routes, another for your product routes, each with its own logic, and then you just pull them into your main app. So clean, so organized. Remember that assembly line we talked about? Well, the order of the stations is absolutely critical. It just makes sense, right? An authentication middleware has to come before the routes you want to protect. And this principle is never more important than when we start talking about handling errors.
Express has a special kind of middleware designed just for catching errors, and you can spot it a mile away. See, normal middleware has 3 arguments: req, res, next. But an error handler has a 4th one right at the beginning: err. That unique signature is the signal to Express. It's how it knows, aha, this is my final safety net for when things go wrong.
Now listen up, because this is a classic interview gotcha. This error handler has to go at the very, very end of your middleware chain. Why? Well, think of it as the ultimate catch-all. If an error happens anywhere up the line, Express just gives up on everything else and jumps straight to this final handler so you can send back a nice, clean error response instead of crashing. Order is everything. So we've covered structure, we've covered errors. Let's wrap up with a few key security and best practice topics that really show an interviewer you're thinking like a senior developer. A perfect example of a custom middleware is for authentication. The flow is usually pretty simple. The middleware grabs a token from a header, it checks if it's valid, and if it is, it attaches the user's info to the request object and then calls next to. But if it's invalid, it stops the chain right there and sends back an unauthorized error. It's a beautiful, practical use of the middleware pattern. So how do you stop a bad actor from just spamming your API with thousands of requests? You guessed it, with middleware. There are great libraries like Express Rate Limit that make it super easy to add a layer that just keeps track of requests and blocks anyone who gets too aggressive. It's a simple yet powerful way to protect your server.
File uploads, a common feature and a huge potential security hole. For this, you'll definitely want a specialized middleware like Molter. And please, remember the golden rules. Always limit the file size, validate the actual file type, not just the file extension, and never ever store uploaded files in a public folder where they could be executed.
And so, here we are, right back where we started. From logging requests, to parsing data, to handling routes, to catching errors, to security, it all comes back to that one central concept. If you can clearly explain the middleware pipeline, you can explain Express.js. It really is the key that unlocks the whole thing. So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a little something to chew on. The middleware pattern has been incredibly influential and successful. But technology, as we know, never stands still. So what do you think comes next? What's the next big design pattern that's going to shape the web servers of tomorrow? Something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.